Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Charlie Fibrosis, and tonight we are going to have a very interesting video. So a long time ago I did a video on all of my NASCAR memorabilia, or a good majority of it. Now throughout 2019 things have been added to my collection. I've gotten some diecast, I've gotten some more hero cards, I've gotten some more hats, I've gotten some more other forms of racing memorabilia, and I've had new stories to tell as well. So what we're going to do is, this is a bit of a refresher at least, and a redo sort of on that. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys all the stuff that I've collected, some of the newest stuff that I've collected as well, and tell you a bit about it. So let's kind of get into it. So the very first item that I do want to talk about is, this is my newest creation. This is my card book for the 1990 through 1998 season. So let me kind of explain as to why this is the case. The 1990 through 98 season is a very interesting time in NASCAR's history. During that time, you had great drivers like Richard Petty, Kyle Petty, Davey Allison, Bobby Allison, Bill Elliott, Dale Earnhardt, Alan Kulwicki, Ernie Irvan, the new presence of Jeff Gordon. There were a lot of really good racers during that time. Now, in terms of my experience with the sport, I became a fan in 1999. I was born in 95. So, unfortunately, because I didn't get to see any of this, I missed out on a lot of drivers. And unfortunately, during that time especially, there were a lot of driver deaths and a lot of driver tragedies. You know, that we had Bobby Allison have to retire from the sport due to a head injury at Pocono. Davey Allison and Alan Kulwicki died in aviation accidents. Neil Bonnet died in a racing accident. Rodney Orr died in a racing accident. There were a lot of drivers who had a lot of talent that unfortunately lost their lives due to various conditions during that time. And it's kind of a shame. It's kind of a shame. But there were some great personalities during that time too. And I feel that they should be sort of memorialized in this card book, so I can kind of look back on the past and see it. In addition, it seems that because of the whole cart split in the 90s, because IndyCar became more of a harder series to follow, it caused NASCAR to boom in terms of market share and everything else like that. So it's much easier to collect stuff from the 1990s than it is to collect in the 80s or the 70s or the 60s, because it's generally less easy to find. Now, that's not going to say that the 90s stuff is the most easy to find. A lot of this stuff is over 20 years of age. However, I have managed to snag some really good deals regarding this stuff. Most of the stuff was purchased off of eBay. Some great sellers out there, some very nice people. So let's go into it and let me show you what I've got here. So this is a custom cover that I made. You'll kind of see the inspiration for that when we get a little bit later on in the video. By the way, these videos are going to be split up into different parts, and there will be one en masse large video that will go over every single thing in this set of series. So let's get into it. So here's the cover. We got Dale Earnhardt, Ernie Irvan, Alan Kulwicki, Bill Elliott, Jeff Gordon, Davey Allison, Kyle Petty, and Richard Petty. We got Alan's number, Davey's Texaco star, and let's get into it. So inside here we got some old cards from 1989. My uncle gave these to me. I don't know where he found it. I don't know how he found this, but it was pretty interesting. This is definitely a set that I would love to eventually one day complete out, but 1989, you know, not as big of a year to me personally. So we got Eddie Bischwald, Raymond Beal, Jim Bowen, the Pit Crew Champs in the 17 car, Race 2 of the 1989 season, Race 3, Race 7, race 20, race 24, race 26, and that's everything regarding 1989. So let's go ahead and go into 1990, which is a very interesting year. By the way, one other thing I wanted to say. This is just how I sort my stuff. This is not necessarily the case for everyone. I prefer to go in chronological order, and I have a specific setup for this. So, we got in 1990, the pit crew champs were Bill Elliott's team. The Rookie of the Year was the late Rob Moroso. Crew Chief of the Year, I believe, was Tim Brewer? No, Robin Pemberton. My apologies. Fan favorite driver was Dale Waltrip. We had Dale Earnhardt as the All-Pro driver with Kirk Shelmerdine as his crew chief in 90. Got another All-Pro car to Kirk Shelmerdine. David Smith from Richard Childress Racing. Mike Hill as an All-Pro. Dale Andrews. Harry Battlefield. Eddie Lanier, Danny Lawrence, Cecil Gordon, and James Lauder. We're all pros. And these were guys who were recognized for their talents over the wall, behind the wall, being fundamental aspects to the team. Most of it was consisted of Earnhardt because Earnhardt won the 1990 championship that year. So it makes sense, but there were a few drivers and members of different organizations that were represented in this lineup. Troy Martin, Bobby Moody, Will Lind, Howard Poston, and a memorable moment with the truck driver for Richard Childress Racing. Then we've got the checklist here. There we go. Norman Koshimitsu, who was the truck driver for Richard Childress Racing that season. Alright, and this is how I have it organized. So we've got all the drivers. They're organized from their car number back, and that's how it's set up. One thing I have to say is what I like about these cards is they do give the biographical information for the drivers. This is something that I particularly like because when you look at NASCAR games, or granted it's gotten better in preservation since then, but websites back in the day, they never really always had this information readily available. And I think it's kind of nice to have this immortalized in a card from that particular era. So we got Rick Mast, Rusty Wallace, Dale Earnhardt, Ernie Irvin, Ricky Rudd, Mark Martin, Alan Kwiecki, Rick Wilson, and Bill Elliott. This was signed by Bill in the package. There is a regular Bill Elliott card right behind there. Apparently during 1990, during this pack, they gave out special signed Bill Elliott cards. That's pretty cool. Derek Cope, Jeff Bodine, Tommy Ellis, Hut Strickland, AJ Foyt, Morgan Shepherd, Dale Waltrip, Greg Sachs, Chad Little, Bobby Hillen, Dale Jarrett, Sterling Marlin, Mickey Gibbs, Jimmy Hensley, Kenny Wallace, Ken Schrader, Brett Bodine, Davey Allison, which I like that Davey Allison card, by the way. Michael Waltrip, Harry Gant, H.B. Bailey, Bill Venturini, Larry Pearson, Kyle Petty, Tommy Kendall, Richard Petty, Jack Pennington, James Hilton, Jeff Purvis, Jimmy Means, Dave Mader, Dick Trickle, Chuck Bowen, Lake Speed, Bobby Hamilton, JBD McDuffie, Dave Marcus, Tracy Leslie, Phil Barkdahl, Ken Reagan, Jimmy Horton, Mark Stahl, Randy Baker, Buddy Baker, Jim Sauter. Rest in peace to Buddy Baker there. Charlie Glotzbach, Terry Labonte, who would become a champion in 1995, I believe, with Hendrick Motorsports. Eddie Bushwald, Phil Parsons, Jimmy Spencer, Tommy Houston, Ben Hess, L.D. Ottinger, Peter Soprenzo. I think by this point, right in this particular area, after Phil Parsons or Jimmy Spencer, I believe, this is where it pushes to the Busch Grand National Series. So there's that. We got Bobby Dotter, Jack Ingram, big driver of the time in the NASCAR Busch Grand National Division. Ken Bouchard, Jim Bowen, Elton Sawyer, Ward Burton, Steve Grissom, Ed Barrier, Todd Bodine, eventual NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series champion. Patty Moyes, Bobby Labonte, Billy Standridge, Rodney Combs, Mike McLaughlin, Butch Miller, Robert Presley, Dave Renderez, David Johnson. There is a few doubles in here. Mike Alexander, Joe Nemechek, Tom Peck, and Jeff Burton there at the very end. Now we head on to the crew chiefs. We had Barry Dodson, Jimmy Maker, Kirk Shelmerdine, Tony Glover, Walter Wilson, Robin Pemberton, Paul Andrews, Harry Hyde, Ernie Elliott, Buddy Parrott, Tim Brewer, Mike Beam, Jimmy Fenning, Donnie Wingo, Jeff Hammond, Leonard Wood, Richard Blooms, Larry Mack, Larry McReynolds, Joey Knuckles, Bill Engel, Andy Petrie, Jeffrey Ellis, Gary Nelson, who I believe went on to become a member of the NASCAR rule book, essentially. He took care of NASCAR rules later on in his career. Robbie Loomis, back when he used to run with Petty Enterprises, more commonly known as Jeff Gordon's crew chief in the early 2000s. Travis Carter, Steve Lloyd, Dale Bryant, Cliff Champion, what an awesome name by the way, Dennis Conner, J.C. Elder, Suitcase Jake Elder, Steve Meal, father of former NASCAR racer Shane Meal, Dale Inman, really cool to see Dale Inman there by the way, Ricky Pearson, Rug Richard. Now this is a typo. I've checked this up many times now. This is supposed to be Doug Richard's card, but for some way, they managed to mess it up and they accidentally did a typo here. All the cards that I've looked online all say the same. It all says Rug Richard, which is so funny to me, honestly. Then we got Doug Williams, and then we go on to the owners. We've got one of the most dominating owners of the 1990s, Richard Childress, Tim Morgan, Larry McClure, Rick Hendrick, Jack Roush, Billy Stavola, Harry Melling, Bob Whitcomb, Junior Johnson, Bobby Allison, Bud Moore, Dick Moroso, the Wood Brothers, Don Bushwald, Kenny Bernstein, Raymond Beadle, Robert Yates, Chuck Ryder, Richard Jackson, Leo Jackson, Larry Hendrick, Felix Tabatis, D.K. Ulrich, Cale Yarborough, Butch Mock, Bob Rayleigh, Rod Osterland, Ginny Donlevy, Billy Hagan, Donnie Allison, Neil Bonnet. Now, they have Neil labeled as an owner, but I probably would have put him under driver had I not found out that he did have a Busch Series team. David Pearson, Bob Tullis, Les Richter, Dick Beattie, Jimmy Cox, Elmo Langley. I've only heard about Elmo Langley through NASCAR Thunder 2003. And this is where we're getting into, by the way, this is where we're getting into the whole lineup of those who ran the sport or were behind the scenes. So Langley was a pace car driver. Doyle Ford, Ken Squire, loved Ken Squire, listening to his voice when I was growing up a little bit. Ned Jarrett, Gentleman Ned. Mike Joy, love listening to him. I love listening to Dick Berggren as well on the Pit Reporter. Chris Economaki, Bob Jenkins. Now, let me tell you this. I became a fan of NASCAR in 1999. Let me add this in too. The very first NASCAR game that I was ever introduced to was NASCAR 99. And the way that they had it set up was Bob Jenkins and Benny Parsons both did the commentary for whatever on-track action was going on. And I loved it. Loved it so much. Bob is by far my favorite commentator of all of racing. And he is sorely missed doing play-by-play in racing in general. I know he still does stuff for the Indy 500 weekend leading up to the 500. But man, it's just not the same without Bob Jenkins in the booth. Benny Parsons, always a wonderful color commentator. Very, very funny, very nice, very sweet. And he's missed. He's missed very much in the NASCAR community. Jerry Punch, Dick Brooks, Winston Kelly, Eli Gold, Barney Hall, rest in peace, Jack Root, Jim Phillips. We got a card of Miss Winston and the race stoppers here. And then we get to head into the NASCAR season. So we had race 1 of the Daytona 500 in 1990. Race 2, memorable moment from race 2. From race 3, I'm sorry. Race 3, race 4, memorable moment. Race 5, a memorable moment. Race 6, memorable moment. Race 7, memorable moment. Race 8, memorable moment. Race 9, the Winston. Race 10, race 11, race 12, race 13, race 14, a memorable moment from there. Race 15, race 16. Race 17, race 18, race 19, race 20, race 21, race 22, race 23, race 24, and race 25, which I think that is nearing the end of the NASCAR season. Very, very close. Memorable moment. Race 26, another memorable moment, as well as another memorable moment from 1990. Race 27, Phoenix, I believe. That's a memorable moment for race 28. Race 29, and then the Winston Cup champ, Dale Earnhardt, that year. So it goes through the entire season of 1990. And I'm so happy that they did these cards at the time. It's actually pretty hard to catch some of the older races on YouTube. To those who have tried to preserve the media, tried to preserve the races, they're sometimes difficult to get a hold of. There are some races that, just do not get any coverage whatsoever. But this is pretty cool. You get to see little highlights from each race, each event of the season. And that's really, really cool. Then we go from 1990 to 1993. Strange transition, I know. But very similar to earlier, we've got the drivers up first. Rick Mast, Rusty Wallace, Dale Earnhardt, Ernie Irvan, Ricky Rudd, Mark Martin, Alan Kulwicki, Sterling Marlin, Chad Little. By the way, I think that these are specialty cards because they've got like this hollow film sort of on top of them, from what I recall. Bill Elliott, Jimmy Spencer, Terry Labonte, Jeff Bodine, Wally Dallenbach, Dale Waltrip, Dale Jarrett, Morgan Shepherd, Bobby Labonte, getting his first start in the 22 car. Mustache, Jeff Gordon, Ken Schrader, Brett Bodine, Hutch Strickland, Davey Allison, Michael Waltrip, Harry Gant, Bill Venturini, Kenny Wallace, who drove the number 40 car for Sabco Racing, Phil Parsons, Kyle Petty, Richard Petty, Rick Wilson, Al Unser Jr. I did not know that Al Unser Jr. actually ran in NASCAR for a while. Stanley Smith. This is an interesting card. Stanley Smith actually almost died that season at Talladega. So the fact that they had his card made and what would more or less be like his last racing season in terms of a serious effort, kind of interesting. Kind of interesting there. Alright. Moving on, we got Jimmy Means, Jimmy Hensley, Bob Schott, Ted Musgrave, Jerry O'Neill, Greg Sachs, Bobby Hamilton, Dave Marcus, Dick Trickle, Lake Speed, Jim Sauter, Bobby Helen Jr., Derek Cope, Ward Burton, Tommy Houston, Mike Wallace, Jeff Burton, Tommy Ellis, Bobby Daughter, Tom Peck, Steve Grissom, Todd Bodine, Sean Robinson. I hope that her cancer treatment's going well, by the way. Robert Presley, Chuck Bowen, Tracy Leslie, Jack Sprague, my favorite truck driver of the racing division, Butch Miller, Joe Nemechek, Jim Bowen, Ricky Craven, and then we head to the crew chiefs: Buddy Parrott, Andy Petrie, Tony Glover, Gary DeHart, Steve Meal, Paul Andrews, Ken Wilson, Ernie Elliott. Mike Beam, Jimmy Fenning, Pete Wright, Donnie Ringo, Howard Comstock, Barry Dodson, Jake Elder, Jimmy Maker, Leonard Wood, Tim Brewer, Ray Evernham, let me see. Ken Howes, Donnie Richardson, Mike Hill, Larry Mack, Doug Hewitt, Jeff Hammond, Doug Richard, and this one is actually correctly written. Harry Hyde, Robin Pemberton, Robbie Loomis, Dale Inman. He was the team manager that season. I thought I'd include some of the team managers with the crew chief, because they have a fairly important role. Sandy Jones, Dennis Conner, David Fugue, Tony Selberg, Doug Williams, Bob Johnson, Tony Ernie Sr., by the way, Gil Martin, Clyde McLeod, Bob Elliott, who's Bobby and Terry's father, Ricky Pearson, Vic Kanagas, Leo Jackson and Richard Jackson, Roger Penske, Don Miller, Richard Childress, Tim Morgan, Larry McClure. Oh, because one of the owners now. And this one also includes the brothers Teddy, Jerry, and Ed McClure. I didn't know that there were more McClure brothers involved. Rick Hendrick, Jack Roush, Mickey Stavala, Bill Stavala, Harry Melling, Junior Johnson, Bobby Allison, Bob Bilby, Billy Hagan, Bud Moore, Joe Gibbs, Dick Moroso. Interesting, because this is essentially the rookie card, so to speak, of Joe Gibbs for NASCAR. Glenn Wood, rest in peace, recently passed away earlier this week. Eddie Wood, Len Wood, Bill Davis, Kenny Bernstein, Robert Yates, Chuck Ryder, Felix DeBatis, Larry Hedrick, D.K. Ulrich, Ray DeWitt, George Bradshaw, Mark Smith, Cale Yarborough, Butch Mock, Bob Riley, Junior Don Levy, and Frank Cece and Scott Weller. And then this one's kind of interesting, because we'll see in a later episode of team cards. So this has all the teams that ran that, a good chunk of teams to highlight from that season. So we had information on Dale Earnhardt, Ernie Irvin, the 5-team, Mickey Rudd with Hendrick Motorsports, Mark Martin with Roush, Alan Kawicki with Alan Kawicki Racing, Sterling Marlin with the Stavala Brothers, Bill Elliott with Junior Johnson, Bobby Labonte with Bill Davis, Jeff Gordon with Hendrick Motorsports, of course, and his entire career there. Ken Schrader with Hendrick Motorsports, Davey Allison with Robert Yates Racing, Kenny Schrader with Felix DeBatis Racing, Sabco, Kyle Petty with Sabco, and then Bobby Hamilton with TriStar Motorsports. That's rather interesting, because I think that the name of the team eventually got bought out. So they no longer exist as they originally once were. So there's that. All right. Dick Beattie, who was one of the related people to the NASCAR brass. Then we go on into the races. We got the Busch Clash, the Daytona 500 in 1993. Yes, 1993. Rockingham. The Memorable Moment. Richmond, Atlanta, another memorable moment. Darlington, Bristol, North Wilkesboro, memorable moment. Martinsville, Talladega, memorable moment. The Winston, Charlotte, Dover, Sears Point, Pocono, Michigan. Memorable moment for the Daytona July race. Another memorable moment, and then the race 15 at Daytona. Memorable moment, race 16 at Pocono, 17 at Talladega, 18 Watkins Glen, the IVOC champion that season. 19 Michigan, memorable moment. Race 21. Yep, we're missing race 20, by the way. Race 22 at Richmond, race 23 at Dover, race 24 at Martinsville, race 25 at North Wilkesboro, race 26, let's say Charlotte. Yep. The Winston Cup Pit Crew Champs, race 27 at Rockingham, race 28 at Phoenix. Memorable moment, race 29 at Atlanta, the Winston Cup champion of 1992, that would be Alan Kawicki. Winston Cup Rookie of the Year, Crew Chief of the Year, which I will take a look at that real quick just to see. Jimmy Hensley and Larry McReynolds, respectively, with the Winston Cup Rookie and the Crew Chief of the Year. Fan favorite driver was Bill Elliott, I believe. The Grand National Champion, I believe, was Joe Nemechek. Yep. And then the Busch Grand National Rookie of the Year was NASCAR veteran Ricky Craven. I'm sorry. And then we got the checklist here. Alright, so this one's kind of interesting. So I actually have, pretty similar to all of these special top-of-the-line 1993 cards, I actually have some 1994 cards as well, identical or similar to that previous set. Here's the problem, though. The seller that I talked to, he was great. He was very, very kind, and he was very understanding. He accidentally sent me an incomplete pack. He told me to go ahead and keep them. I've got them in a tin somewhere nearby. I did plan on putting them in here, but I don't think I have enough room. But I did eventually get a 1994 almost, if not 100% complete set here. I think when I counted out these cards, there was maybe one missing. That's not a big deal to me. So going through it, Rick Mast, Rusty Wallace, Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Purvis, Jimmy Hensley, Ricky Rudd, Mark Martin, Alan Kawicki, Tommy Kendall, Sterling Marlin, P.J. Jones, T.W. Taylor, I believe it is. Yep. Bill Elliott, Jimmy Spencer, Terry Labonte, Jeff Bodine, Lake Speed, Wally Dallenbach, Jr., that is. Dale Waltrip, Dale Jarrett, Chad Little, Joe Ruttman, Morgan Shepard, Bobby Labonte, a cleanly shaven and rainbow warriored Jeff Gordon there. Ken Schrader, Brett Bodine with Kenny Bernstein. Hut Strickland, Davey Allison, Ernie Irvin, Andy Hillenberg, Michael Waltrip, Neil Bonnet, Jimmy Horton, Harry Gant, Kenny Wallace. Phil Parsons, Kyle Petty, Rick Wilson, who was driving the 44 that season instead of the 43. Rich Bickle, James Hilton, Stanley Smith, Jimmy Means, Ted Musgrave, Rick Corelli. You guys would probably recognize from the Truck Series back in the day. Greg Sachs, Bobby Hamilton, Roy Allen, I believe. Yep, Roy Allen. Dave Marcus, a very, very youthful John Andretti, Dick Trickle, Ken Bouchard, Bob Schott, Jim Sauter, Bobby Helen Jr., and Derek Cope. And that's all the Cup Series, guys. Rodney Combs, Ward Bunton, Richard Lasseter, I believe, Tommy Houston, Jeff Burton, Mike Wallace, Bobby Donner, David Bonnet, who was Neil's son, Jeff Green, Tom Peck, Randy LaJoy, Ed Barrier, Hermie Sadler, Roy Payne, Steve Grissom, Todd Bodine, Shauna Robinson, David Green, Tim Fedewa, a very young Tim Fedewa there, Jason Keller, Dennis Stetson, Robert Presley, Chuck Bowen, Nathan Butke, Tracy Leslie. Jack Sprague, that's very, very cool to have, by the way. Butch Miller, Dave Resendez, Joe Nemechek, Troy Beal, Larry Pearson, Joe Bessie, Jim Bowen, and Ricky Craven in a rather interesting DuPont car for 1994. Going on to the crew chief, we got Buddy Parrott, Andy Petrie, Tony Glover, Gary DeHart, Steve Meal, Paul Andrews, Ken Wilson, Harry Hyde, Mike Beam, Jimmy Hensley, Doug Williams, Donnie Wingo, Howard Comstock, Barry Dodson, Jimmy Maker, Dennis Conner, Leonard Wood, Tim Brewer, Pete Wright, Ray Evernham, Ken Howes, Donnie Richardson, Mike Hill, Larry Mack, Doug Hewitt, Jeff Hammond, Doug Richard. His card apparently slid out a little bit. Walter Wilson, Robin Pemberton, Robbie Loomis, Dale Inman, Sandy Jones. Let's see who that is. Dale Fishline, I think it is. Fishline, I guess so. Troy Selberg, Bob Johnson, Tony Ernie. Under the owners, Richard and Leo Jackson, Roger Penske, Don Miller. I forget that Don Miller actually was part of the initial founding of Team Penske, because eventually just Penske kind of ran away with it on his own. Richard Childress, Tim Morgan, Larry McClure. Once again, the brothers, Teddy, Jerry, and Ed McClure. And then Rick Hendrick. Jack Roush, Bill Stavola, Mickey Stavola, Harry Melling, Junior Johnson, Bobby Allison, Bob Bilby, Billy Hagan, Bud Moore, George Bradshaw, Dennis Few, Dick Moroso, Bill Davis, Kenny Bernstein, Joe Gibbs, Glenn Wood, Len Wood, Eddie Wood. All the Wood brothers. And I like that they had all these different guys here. That's one thing that bothers me about 1999. Or 1990, I'm sorry. Robert Yates, Chuck Ryder, Phil Sabatis, Larry Hedrick, Richard Petty, Mark Smith, Butch Mock, Ray and Diane DeWitt, D.K. Ulrich, Gene Donlevy, Cale Yarborough. And then we go to the teams. We've got, I believe this was Precision Product Racing with the one of Rick Mast. Penske Racing South. It was also called Penske South Racing, which I like better. Of Rusty Wallace, Dale Earnhardt with RCR, Mark Martin with Jack Roush, Jeff Bodine Racing with the renumbered, reskinned number 7 car that was Alan Kowicki's equipment. The Stavala Brothers Racing with the 8, I believe that was Jeff Burton. Ricky Rudd with Rudd Performance Motorsports, because he went on to form his own team and did rather successful, I might say. Jim Johnson and Associates with Bill Elliott. Bud Moore Engineering with Lake Speed. I think that was Dale Waltrip's own team there. Darwall Racing with Dale Waltrip. Joe Gibbs Racing with Dale Jarrett. Wood Brothers with Morgan Shepard. Bill Davis Racing with Bobby Labonte. Jeff Gordon with Hendrick Motorsports. Ken Schrader with Hendrick Motorsports. And King Racing had Brett Bodine. Jim Johnson and Associates with Jimmy Spencer. Ernie Irvin with Robert Yates Racing. Michael Waltrip, I believe. Yep. With Bahari Racing. Leo Jackson Motorsports with Harry Gant. Kyle Petty with Sabco. Wally, this is strange. They changed right in the middle of the cards and so, but I guess these were published at a different time. The 43 came back. The 44 was dropped. Rick Wilson was taken out of the car, and Wally Dallenbach Jr. was put into the car. Interesting. Marcus Auto Racing with Dave Marcus. Todd Bodine with Butch Mark. And Bobby Hone Jr. with Jim Donlevy and his team. Mobile Moment at Daytona, race 1. End of the Daytona 500 with Dale Jarrett winning the race. Rockingham, memorable moment. Richmond, memorable moment. Race 4, race 5 at Atlanta and Darlington. Memorable moment at Bristol with that week being Alan Quicky's untimely death. Bristol for race 6. Memorable moment. Race 7 at North Wilkesboro. Race 8. Race 9. Race 10. Race 11. Race split right in the middle. I didn't realize that Sterling Marlin won a Winston Open. That's kind of cool. Race 11 at Charlotte for the Coca-Cola 600. Race 12, race 13, race 14, race 15, race 16, race 17. Memorable moment at Talladega, 2 of them actually. So, the pre-race for the life and celebration of Davey Allison, and then the Stanley Smith crash that I mentioned earlier. I did make a mistake, so I do apologize for the incorrect timing on the year. Talladega, Dale Earnhardt won that race. Watkins Glen with Mark Martin, a memorable moment here at the Glen. Mark Martin then won Michigan. Won at Bristol, so he won 4 races in a row. He won Darlington that season? He sure did. Wow. Mark went on a tear of winning 4 weeks in a row. That's rather impressive. Rusty Wallace wins Richmond. Then went on to win Dover. Robert Yates Racing won Martinsville, and then Rusty comes back at North Wilkesboro and gets the W. At Charlotte for race 27, Ernie Irvin is the big winner there. Race 28 at Rockingham, Rusty is the winner. Mark Martin wins Phoenix. Race 30 at Atlanta, Rusty wins. And then we get the championship winner. That would be Dale Earnhardt, and the winner of the race at Atlanta, Rusty Wallace. To round out the season, you got Steve Grissom as your Busch Grand National Champion. Henry Sadler is your Busch Grand National Rookie of the Year. The Winston Cup Pit Crew champs were Penske Racing South that season. Steve Neal was the Crew Chief of the Year. Jeff Gordon was the Rookie of the Year. Fan favorite was Bill Elliott. The IROC champ was Davey Allison. And then this was included too, which I think is rather interesting. This is a bit of a blast of the past, and they're all Rookie of the Years. So 1982 Rookie of the Year was Jeff Bodine. 1985 was Ken Schrader. 1986 was Alan Kawicki. And 1989 was Dick Trickle. Go on to here. 1992 was Jimmy Hensley. In 1993, Winston Cup racer and eventual champion Bobby Bonte. A couple of check marks, and then we can talk about this. Now, I actually have 2 of these, which is kind of goofy. I purchased these hero cards off of eBay, and I guess I kind of forgot that I ordered one before I ordered another one and just kind of got confused. But this is really cool. This is a 1991 hero card of Davey Allison. You flip it on the back, it's got all the information, and it's very, very detailed. It gives you the entire Winston Cup schedule, and includes when and where he was going to race. The Busch Series car, it's just so rich. It kind of reminds me of an old school newspaper, and so, but this is really, really cool. I will treasure these forever. This one got a little bit of damage in the mail, unfortunately, which is why it's in this card protector here, poster protector. But I generally keep all my hero cards in sheet protectors, so I can keep them in binders and make it easier. So that's about everything there for 1990 through 1998. So that's going to kind of wrap it up here. I hope you all loved it, and we'll go on to the next video very, very soon.